Authenticity is a therapeutic intervention, and we become more authentic through opening ourselves up to our emotions and our own self inquiry from our intellect and thoughts as well as our body, from the spiritual and or the mystical, we could say. That's why I fully really promote, the use of yoga as a therapeutic tool as well, mindfulness, meditation, energy, and the physical form of being here. How do you bring that into your humanness? Confessions of a Therapist. Your therapist has a story too. I've been a therapist for over 10 plus years, and for the majority of those first 9-ish years, something felt off. Even if I didn't fully realize it, something felt off. And what I've come to in the last year as I've opened up to go beyond just individual based therapy and more into group type of work and more into trusting myself intuitively, showing myself more authentically, as I believe and know from this experience over the past year, that authenticity is an intervention in and of itself. And I think that goes into some of Person-Centered Approach by Carl Rogers. When the intention or the energy behind one showing up as a therapist is of pure, genuine care, compassion, empathy, presence, their own safety, their own ability to be self-aware, their own ability to connect. And I think these are more intuitive, innate skills. They're harder to learn. But anyway, welcome. Welcome to the You Amaze Me recording. This is a sacred space where story meets soul and soul meets story. And today it is just me here sharing more of my story. How did I come to be or get to this point? How did I get here? And I think a lot of that comes from opening up into or showing, revealing more for you and others what is behind the scene. So let's go back and then I'll get into some anecdotal things. I don't have an agenda. Most of my recordings here are stream of consciousness, and I think that just comes from releasing some of my armor or shedding some of that skin, putting some of that guard down and showing myself. And I think a lot of people fear that. For many people who want to step into maybe starting their own business or creating more abundance, working a job that is more aligned with something that you are naturally good at or passionate about. I mean, we work 40 plus hours a week. And if it's a job you hate, that's 40 some hours that you hate your life. And I truly believe that you can be the same authentic version of you in the majority of areas of your life. And of course, that comes with some level of awareness and filtering around certain people. But think about the majority of where you spend your time. And are you able? Do you feel safe? Is it aligned with you in a way that you can be yourself? And every person that I encountered in myself as being a therapist or even outside of therapy, I believed at the time that I was being my most present, authentic self. Through this evolution of growth and development as you get older, hopefully, typically, you become more consciously aware, more insightful, more able to reflect back. But that doesn't necessarily happen for everyone. And if you're here, I think that means that it's happening for you or it will happen for you. And if this video is not for you, I'm not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. So let me go back. Because I think, like I said, authenticity is its own intervention, its own therapeutic intervention. And I do not recommend to the people that I work with, or even to people that I share my heart and soul, my insight and wisdom with, I do not recommend anything that I'm not doing, that I haven't tried myself. So if I am promoting and encouraging people to be more authentically them, and I think authenticity is a buzzword these days, but maybe it's just come into greater consciousness. It's come into the greater collective intelligence that people truly want to be themselves. And how can you be yourself if you don't know who you are? And how may or why would I encourage people to be themselves if I'm not doing that? And sometimes in my history, like I said, of being a therapist, it felt pressured to do it a certain way. It felt performative, the way initially that I had to dress, even the types of scheduling, how many clients I had to see, what we were working on, and the goals that we were making per a treatment plan, and the interventions or the models that I had to use because we had a grant for them, so to speak, or they were the evidence-based models, or insurance said we will only approve this and reimburse this if you're demonstrating that you're utilizing these specific models. I'm not saying those models don't help people, but if we're required to use them with every single client per se, or just because a client had this specific diagnosis that then they needed that intervention, that specific model, that may not be what works for them. There are people that are outliers that might need a different approach. And thankfully, I worked with a lot of supervisors that were supportive of that. While in coming out of those clinics, those outpatient mental health clinics or agencies that I work for, and working for myself as I became more confident and courageous and ready, it's all in time. There's no rush. Though as that occurred for me, I got to I got to be more autonomous and I got to experiment. And that led to what I have come to find just in the past 24 hours is a level of vulnerability to show yourself. And that's not just as a therapist. I say this from what might be inhibiting you from your own growth in your own life, whether it's in your business, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's just personally, is showing you, really showing you. And a lot of that comes from story. And a lot of that is in sharing your story, whatever that story might be in this moment. It might be different in a week from now, it might be different 5 years from now. Trusting yourself in the moment to pause, to ground, to breathe, because you are the author of your story, of what has already occurred, what you reflect back on. You can even adjust it and change it just with your perception. You don't have to remember it in the same way. And what you write now in this moment is going to affect the next page. And that is what is so powerful in you being the creator and the designer of your life and doing it intentionally. And perhaps with that courage of that vulnerability to share it somewhere. And maybe that's what makes social media so popular. Maybe that's what makes these streaming recordings so popular, is because people long to be recognized. And that's what therapy was created for, a therapist to be the one that gets to recognize the client. And I think that's why Carl Rogers' person-centered approach is really the foundation, the therapeutic alliance of the therapy, that you feel safe and comfortable and seen and understood by your therapist. And could that just be who they are as a human? We don't know. What if you found out that outside of that, they were mean, that they abused their kids, that they had, I don't have other examples off the top of my head, but would that affect what they brought for you? And I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm not saying, oh, that should. I'm genuinely asking a question for you to go into your own critical thinking, to have a discussion, and we might disagree. And that's healthy because that promotes higher states of consciousness through the critical thinking. That if you found out things about them that surprised you or shocked you that were negative and or positive, would that change the way that the therapy impacted you? Do you want to know things about your therapist? Do you? And I've asked this, and I'm going to share some of the responses. I'm getting over my head, but all of this is just how I speak. Whatever comes out, and then I circle back around. So like I said, the vulnerability, not that I say this from a stance of a therapist needs to be vulnerable with their client, that they need to self-disclose and they need to share their story. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying outside of that, me, what I'm doing right now is we're not in a therapy session and I'm sharing this. If my clients happen to come across that, that could be maybe unethical but if they found me on their own, I'm not necessarily going to my client and say, hey, watch this video. And if I did do that, I would think that through in terms of what's clinically appropriate. And if there was an ethical violation, I would take the consequence. If it caused harm, I would take the consequence. The repair is also what's important because we're not perfect beings and we're terrified of making mistakes, terrified of doing something wrong. And then that puts us in boxes so that we're rigid, that we don't trust ourselves in the present moment because everything is so individualized. Yet we live in a culture and society that really attempts to control and have order. And I get it. We need that. We need order. And we also need disorder, which is wildly ironic to me that we call them mental health disorders, as if our humanness, or when we are struggling mentally with a mental health challenge, with symptoms, with a diagnosis, that we're saying you're disordered. But perhaps that disorder is happening to show you something. Perhaps that out of order in you is helping you come back to yourself, helping you to remember who you are. So the vulnerability, even outside of that, outside of my profession, is a way to connect, is a way to support, is a way to help, is a way to serve. That when I check myself, am I sharing this for some self-involved reason, for my own personal gain or pleasure? I don't get anything from this. I'm not asking for anything. I don't need anything aside from the spark of spontaneity that I had to come on here and hit record and focus on confessions of a therapist. That there's behind the label of a therapist. And that by you sharing something, you open yourself up to your growth, to your expansion, that it's coming from a place of service because someone will hear it and it will impact. That by hearing your own experience being reflected from another can be the most, or one of the most powerful agents of change. Not change that you need to be different than who you are, but change in your perspective, change in what you're feeling in that moment. Because then perhaps you feel seen. Perhaps you feel that you're not alone. Your vulnerability, though, is not just sharing something that happened to you. Not solo, maybe that's not the best word. It's not specific per se to a traumatic event. Yes, you might disclose that you experienced something traumatic, though my interpretation, this is my belief, that the vulnerability isn't really that. The vulnerability isn't, I was robbed at gunpoint. To me, the vulnerability is deeper. The vulnerability is, how did that affect you? Example, that perhaps a person was sexually abused, or they were physically abused, or they were taken advantage of, emotionally neglected, raised by a narcissistic or emotionally unavailable or emotionally immature parent. All of those things, they could share that. What I find to be most vulnerable, though, is the impact that it had on you, the impact that it had on that person. That perhaps they grew up and they were terrified to be in a relationship. Maybe they became avoidant or anxious, an insecure attachment. Maybe they got into drugs. And then that addiction also then had an impact. Because maybe that addiction affected their brain, where they really struggled with a sense of safety in themselves, a sense of being present. Maybe they were terrified of being abandoned, or I could just go example after example after example. Maybe they stole from other people. The vulnerability is the understanding of yourself because of your willingness to go deeper in you through that sense of introspection and self-discovery. And I find that happens with a therapist. They or a coach or a healer or a mentor or a teacher or a really great friend. And someone else being able to say, me too, or I get it. Not because they maybe had the same experience, but because they get the impact, they relate. And that doesn't necessarily get to happen in therapy if the therapist is bound by certain ethics to not say, me too. They can like indicate maybe. And again, this is offering things to consider, not necessarily saying that every therapist needs to self disclose or say me too or share anything that they don't feel intuitively and clinically appropriate to share. Though I know many people relate and many clients have experienced therapists that they felt were cold or weren't really listening, weren't really present. This is opening up perspective and conversation. So let me go back because I've already said that like 15 minutes ago. Let me go back. So I knew I wanted to be a therapist around the time that I was a teenager, 15, 16 years old. I was really into psychology, was so excited to take AP Psych. I loved reading books about characters who had their own mental health struggles, depression. I was like super emo, really into I'll just name the artist because why not? Why can't you get to know me? And is that something to keep from my clients? Most would look at me now and not anticipate that I also loved like the screamo punk music, going into concerts like Warp Tour and jumping in mosh pits, and I loved it. I remember my Linkin Park concert with POD, if you recall. That was, I mean, one of the best concerts where I first crowd surfed for the first time. And I wasn't even old enough to drive yet. And I went with two friends that were old enough to drive. And my mom only let me go because she was friends with their mom. And and I was so fortunate to have that connection. My mom wouldn't let me go to a concert with somebody that she wasn't close with. So even if I introduced her to a friend from school, I think if she wasn't close with their parents, she would have been like, no, when I was 15 years old. And so because I thankfully had these friends through mutual family friends, that they were a couple years older and took me to all of these concerts. And so I remember seeing Fall Out Boy at this really small dive bar for like the first time, and there were like 10 people there. And they took me to so many other shows. I mean, I saw like Taking Back Sunday so many times, and The Used. Oh man, I can't even like think of them right now. But that, from a really young age, I started writing poetry when I was 7 years old. And from a really young age, I was really into lyrics. And I found that the emo, like pop punk scene. So I saw like Simple Plan with them, Newfound Glory. And then I got more into like the screamo type of the Chariot, Fear Before the March of Flames, Blood Brothers, Every Time I Die. And so I got more into like the screamo, like hardcore type of music as well. But that was always a part of me. And I say, like, emo's not a fad, emo's not a phase. That's still in me, even if as I got older into college, that scene wasn't around where I went to undergrad at James Madison University. And I got so into psychology. I loved it. I loved my professors. I loved learning about the study of human behavior. And I apply that to myself. Still, the study of my own humanness. And I look at mental health as our humanness and why we do what we do, not as necessarily disorders. So I was super curious about that at a young age. I decided to major in psychology, like I said, then graduated from James Madison and went to grad school for social work because I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. But to be a psychologist, you needed to likely get your PhD or your PsyD. It was more years of school. And I also found out that they mostly only do testing. And I wanted to have the interactions with people. I wanted to work with people. interned at an addictions clinic. I interned at a batterers intervention program. So, working with the perpetrators of domestic violence. I was like the only woman in that group with a ton of males. And it was such a profound experience. But at that time, it was more about case conceptualization. Here's this person, read their chart, tell me about them. What's their diagnosis? What are their goals and treatment plan? How are we going to make them a better human and citizen of society to fall into the conformity and norms? And really, I didn't know this then, but I look back now and it's like, what's the root of those behaviors? We won't want to send these domestic violent perpetrators back into society because they beat their wife. Sure. A lot of them were mandated by court. I also got to observe the court hearings, but they were mandated by court to go to mental health counseling and do community service. That's usually what their uh, consequences were for the people who were submitting these violations against them, understandably. Though if they're only required to go for 3 months, do they really get into the deep work? And they're already, I'm sure, on guard because they're required to see this person. This person doesn't even know them. So I get it. Like, I can put myself as much as I can. I don't have that lived experience. I didn't know this then, and I wasn't the one working with them. I was observing as an undergrad in college. And, I think about them now. I didn't even know I was going to bring this up. I am not saying that anybody that does harm like that is should be necessarily forgiven or um like off the hook, though the work done to transform them out of what they're doing so they don't go back into the world and do it again because they're hurting inside. They have pain. Just like the pain of the victims. We all have pain. Pain is a part of our human experience. And what pain do you choose to bear? Certainly those people, and men can be the victims of domestic violence too. There were women who were also getting like peace orders and protective orders against them. So I don't want to put it in the gender categories either. Though we also need to know that we repeat patterns and sometimes we put ourselves in situations to be abused as an adult, very different as a child. And again, not saying that they are choosing it per se, but it's through awareness that you recognize and through a change in pattern that you learn to hopefully act a little differently, to make a different decision for the person who inflicts the harm, to maybe not react in that way, for the person who chooses to stay in a relationship, to maybe reach out to somebody to leave, but to reflect on the why. In therapy or even with kids, we are told to not ask why. And even I think in investigations, they're like when you're investigating or interrogating and doing like a interview or questionnaire, we're told, I remember learning this in school, when someone tells you how they feel, don't ask why. And now I'm like, I ask why all the time to get curious. Where does that feeling come from? Where do you feel it in your body? What is the intention, the agenda behind the emotion or the behavior? What leads you to these kinds of relationships? Why do you feel like you need to? Not even need, and maybe it's not a feeling, but can you notice that you or whoever reacts? These to me are important questions. And so that's what I wanted to be able to do, not fully even knowing, and that's what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to work with people and be a counselor or therapist. So I went to graduate school for social work. I had, like I said, an internship at an addictions residential treatment center for teens. That supervisor, incredible. That supervisor took me to these like holistic trainings, and I got to observe. And she was the one that said, Amanda, you should go to graduate school for social work. And so that's where I went. First year, waste. like because I had to do 2 years because my undergrad degree was in psychology. If I had done social work in undergrad, then I could have gone for 1 year. But because of the system, I had to put all this money in. and take 2 years of school, take classes that felt very repetitive. I did it, had some great field experience, worked at another residential treatment center for children, significant abuse and trauma, neglect, foster care. It was a great foundation for me to further learn and also really work with severely challenged children. I mean, what I want to say, like mentally ill children? No, no. It was an honor. I say this for every client. It is an honor for me to get to know you and work with you. And I think my presence as being more childlike with those kids, we did a lot of games and I made them therapeutic in some way. Or we went for walks. We made hot chocolate, a place of safety for them. They need to feel safe. And if that's not in the foundation of what you're creating, you and another person doesn't even have to be your therapist. You're going to have your guard up and you're not going to be in that more flow type of state where you can speak as I'm speaking right now. These recordings to me are better when I am more able to speak truthfully and authentically. They might not be in a clear, concise order. And like I said, that might not be for everyone. So I then had the internship at the residential treatment center. I took a job there and I worked there for 2.5 years. I left there and went to an outpatient mental health clinic through the same nonprofit, worked as a contracted therapist in multiple schools, elementary schools and middle schools. I really enjoyed working with kids and it was hard work. I had to see a certain number of clients per week. I would have at times fitting in 9 clients in a day, 40-minute sessions. 9 clients was my 8-hour day, back to back to back to back. So if I'm only at a school for 2 days in the week, but I have 20 kids I need to see, then you got to fit it in. And it became very robotic. Even as much as I was authentic as I could be, as I felt was in the confines of my role and my profession, it burnt me out. And the burnout was a signal, not that I needed a vacation, not that necessarily anything was wrong with the people I worked with or the place that I worked or the environment that I was in per se. It was more, am I listening to myself? And I didn't always know that at the time. At the time, I was just mad at the job and I'd be like, all right, I'm leaving and I'm going to find the next job. And then it would repeat itself. I went to smaller private group practices and continually would overwork. 1, because I love the job, but 2, it also served some sort of external validation for me and busyness for me. It was this addiction to productivity. And in getting more curious about that, I was like, well, what does it stem back to? What is perhaps going on in me internally that my outward behaviors continue to perpetuate this cycle of work hard, burnout, leave, find a new job, have an easier schedule, believe it's a better environment with a better, more work like culture and morale and life work balance, and then still reaching that point of burnout per se, just tired, irritable. But a lot of it is novelty for me. A lot of it is in like, it starts to feel mundane and I need something different. So some of that is just knowing myself of I enjoy novelty and I enjoy things not following a specific structure. I don't want the same routine every day. I enjoy the freedom to make my own schedule. And I also love having variety. And that's because I know myself. And to share that with a client so that they can perhaps see that mirrored back to them, that's not really super vulnerable, but that is because I reflected on myself and learned something about myself and can use that as an example without violating any sort of ethics. While I also know that my own deeper wounds can help and support people, again, when clinically appropriate. I grew up as an only child and utilized a lot of that writing and poetry as an outlet for my loneliness. Not every only child is lonely, but I was. My cousins weren't really around the same age. I had friends, not to say I didn't have friends, though something felt off as a kid of like, where do I fit in? I went to an elementary school where I was the primarily only Caucasian in the school and only technically Jewish girl in the school. And I was scared to share that. So my dad's Christian, my mom's Jewish. You technically are what your mother is, even though we weren't super Orthodox or even like conservative. Didn't really practice it, and it's not really what I believe in now. I was scared. I didn't want to own that because I wanted to fit in as a sense of belonging. But then I wasn't being myself, and that started out so young. So my loneliness, I know, is also a part of my drive for connection. And I get that through therapy. Well, I don't want therapy to be an external way of fulfillment in me. I want the therapy to be a natural service, not to be what leads me to not feel lonely. That's on me. And that's on everybody. That so many of us seek external validation, reinforcement, praise, achievement, success. We view the external and the material as a way to fill something. And it feels good, of course, but it's not going to be long lasting. It's a temporary thing. I know that I have some connection with something beyond myself, spiritually. And I know that spirituality, there's some research studies that show that it's an 80% protective factor. Spirituality is an 80% protective factor against depression and suicide. Suicide is the highest leading cause of death in teenagers. And I myself, in being my super emo, melancholy, sad kid, childlike self, did struggle with that. And I commend myself for my survival through music, through writing, through dance, which then led me eventually to become a yoga instructor. And I'm so thankful for following the impulses that everything that happened led me to here. And that led me to have more trust in myself, more confidence in myself, to build something that I never even imagined that I would create, to create what does not exist yet. Because I did go out of my comfort zone. And so after I left multiple small group practices, I joined a private practice with two colleagues and friends of mine and got to offer, one-on-one therapy that way, while also in 2020, just before COVID. So was that 2019 maybe? So it was right before COVID. I spontaneously decided to do a yoga teacher training just for my own benefit, to learn more about yoga. I didn't anticipate or expect to teach yoga. And there was a place that I had gone several times that I enjoyed. They sent an email that they were offering a 200-hour yoga teacher training. It was going to be on weekends. The costs seemed affordable. On the spot, decided I'm going to apply and I'm going to do it. Didn't overthink it. Didn't write a pros cons list. It was like, I want to do this. So did that. COVID hit. It became virtual for about half of the teacher training. And then afterwards, I was approached by another yoga studio owner who really wanted me to teach at her studio. Because it was COVID at the time, she said, why don't you come to the studio and do live streams? Because we can't have anybody here. We can't be around people. And so it offered me a way to teach where I wasn't in front of a crowd. I had a huge fear of public speaking, and I have since I was a kid. Though what I have found is that fear only is when I have to speak on something that I don't feel confident in or an expert on, or that wasn't my choice. So in college, when I had to do communications class and do speeches and they told you what you had to present on, or again, it was, you need to do it this way and you're going to be graded, I was terrified. And I rehearsed insanely, again, because I don't like making mistakes and I wanted to get grades because the feeling was so uncomfortable. Whereas now is if I make a mistake or if I get in trouble, I can tolerate it. I have the skills for it because I've engaged in my own work practices to do that because I care about myself. Showing up for therapy and these practices and getting to know yourself and sharing yourself, having this relationship with self is because you care about yourself. And that's incredible. And so when I started teaching, thankfully not in front of a lot of people early on, I got a lot of practice. And it was the practice that got me better. It wasn't like, okay, Amanda, now all of a sudden you are this great yoga teacher or you can speak in front of crowds. It built upon each other over years of time. And I think that's the way that we evolve and we grow and we transform and we bring more into your life that you want in these small, slow steps. There's people who win the lottery and they don't know how to manage their money, but also because they might not be ready for that amount of money because they don't believe they're worthy of that amount of money. It is these inner beliefs that are so important. And when you get to know them about yourself, and again, they might change. You might have this one belief for a period of time, and then it's another belief because we're evolving and we're complex and we're constantly changing. Though having conversations with yourself, getting to know yourself, and then sharing more of what that story is. And really, mine, if we take the themes, is going back to your intuition, trusting yourself and following the impulses, taking the risk. You might make a mistake. You might go 3 steps back. You might go 5 steps forward and then 3 steps back. That doesn't mean don't keep going. It might mean you pivot and change direction, or it might just be taking you back further to create more space. Because we need the space. We need the space to tolerate things. And in that spaciousness, you expand. And in that expansion, you invite more in, you receive more from the negative and to the positive. We need the duality. We are here as humans. We can't be in this like dream world state all of the time, just dreaming about what you want. You actually can have it in physical form through your inner experience that then comes outward through the power of your words and what you share or how you show yourself. And if we're confined by a job per se, or the way that a role that you try to meet expectations on that isn't authentic to you, your body and your symptoms, you're going to have signals that are going to show you that you're not, or tell you, or you'll experience that you're not being authentic. Authenticity is a therapeutic intervention, and we become more authentic through opening ourselves up to our emotions and our own self-inquiry from our intellect and thoughts as well as our body, from the spiritual and or the mystical, we could say. That's why I fully really promote, the use of yoga as a therapeutic tool as well, mindfulness, meditation, energy, and the physical form of being here. How do you bring that into your humanness? Still following order, still following systems, still going through the process and not just rebelling all the time. So the yoga teacher training brought me back to poetry, which was also amazing because we were told to write every day. And I started writing in poetry. So that reminded me that I had these journals full of poetry from when I was a kid and in high school. Thankfully, my mom kept them. And I went back and I read them and I decided I wanted to self-publish them. So I self-published my poetry book. Again, complete epiphany, spontaneous, listening to these impulses while noticing a part of me that is like, Amanda, you're being so like self-focused. Like, who would want to read your poetry book? And why do you keep promoting yourself? Like, this is arrogant. This is selfish. Like, who are you to think that? Well, why not? We all are. There's room for all of us. But I think we do have that part in our brain that doubts and questions of like, oh, what are people going to think? I have that too. So I want to read what somebody said. So because it shows me, again, this deep trust in myself when I was so scared to start to show me more. And I really believe it came through my yoga teacher training. It might not be that for others. Through my yoga teacher training that led me to teach that I didn't expect, but I just listened to myself. Even though at that studio, I got fired from that studio because I started offering yoga-based therapy because people approached me from my classes and said, Amanda, like, I want to do this one-on-one with you. And that's where the idea came, that reflection of somebody else bringing that to me and me going with it and be like, oh, I can offer this as a form of therapy too, not just in my yoga classes where I was incorporating in therapeutic language and therapeutic techniques. Is a very different kind of yoga. And when that yoga studio owner found out that I didn't want to do that work there at the studio, that I decided to get my own place because it just didn't work schedule wise. I tried to see people one on one through the studio. So they were super generous and I'm super grateful for that. But as it grew, there just wasn't the space and the time schedule wise. And so I decided I was going to rent my own space. This is how I grew, not planned, but listening and acting from that heart and from what was coming to me from the outside and as ideas. Let me try it. So I rented out a space. I started offering yoga, individual yoga based therapy, continued with classes, started teaching at another studio, workshops, retreats, and poetry, and then group. So it's so cool that all of this is me and all of this is its own, like I said, therapeutic intervention of just being yourself. Not to say that I don't still have my struggles and my challenges, that I still don't get anxious. That's what separation anxiety is, being maybe as an only child or just as a kid. Cried when I got dropped off to school. I didn't know why. At the time, they felt like stomach aches and I'm going to vomit and I need to go home. And I would go to the nurse every day. Couldn't do sleepovers, had to get picked up early from sleepaway camp. It was this sense of like, they're not coming back for me. Insecure attachment, or this isn't safe. I am scared. And that anxiety still is there while I'm aware of it. And while I utilize these practices, I let that anxiety be there with me while taking action. So on a snow day this past January, so not even a year ago, I had this, again, epiphany, spontaneous idea to take a lot of my recorded classes, because I had some recorded therapeutic yoga and meditations, and I got into utilizing oracle cards and tarot. Not for everyone, and that's okay. But for me, they are the reflection of something that whatever comes up in my psyche from the card offers me information that might be of benefit for that moment. Not psychic, though sometimes I think I depended on them because I didn't feel secure in myself. And so as I really continued to embark on these things, I took those recordings and I decided I wanted to create an online platform, an online course where I could put them for other people to go to. I took other people's courses. I took this course on self-trust and I realized I can do that too. I can make a course. So I made the course and wanted there to be a community component to it. And I thought people need in person. This course cannot just be virtual. So we're going to offer weekly or every other week community groups, and I'm going to facilitate it. Thought about it on the spot, had a great amount of people sign up, and the groups have been incredible. The group work has been in a way more powerful, or just an added benefit to so many of my individual clients. So a lot of my individual clients are the ones that join the group. And the power, again, of openly sharing and being seen, like I said, to hear your story, your experience from another softens you. You feel not alone, or maybe seen, maybe heard, recognized. So I had this group a couple weeks ago. We had an art therapist or paint medicine teacher come and facilitate this art medicine canvas group creation. It was incredible. And one of the people who came brought a friend for the first time to the group. And this person shared with me what the friend had said after the group. And I wanted to share it here. So they said, I asked this friend what was their favorite part of the group. And they said it was when you, meaning me, when you shared, because he always automatically assumes that therapists or mental health professionals have it all worked out and are perfect, grounded beings. And he liked that you were real and vulnerable and shared what is really going on with you. It made him feel comfortable, especially when they were brand new and had differences and felt maybe uncomfortable. You never know that what you share or how you show yourself or how you present, you never know how that might impact someone because that doesn't always get shared. I may have never found that out. And that's not anymore. That is not for me anymore to feel externally validated. It is not anymore about my worthiness. Maybe a small part of my ego, but bigger picture is purpose and service. That those small ways of being vulnerable and willing to show up honestly, authentically, real. And if that means that I can't be a licensed practicing therapist anymore, I will give it away if I'm told that I cannot be real. And that's what's evolved. And that's what's been the most success in my life. It's not the money that I made. I've lost so much money this year doing this. I created these shirts, these You Amaze Me shirts. Please check out on my website, youamazeme.org, www.youamazeme.org. Please look at the shirts. Maybe I'll add in a picture here. I have some new ones with some new sayings on the back that say, help me be human. Your message, your mess is your message. Your mess is your message. I had someone say once, don't make your mess your message. And I don't agree because my story is a mess. Where I went to college, my parents didn't originally necessarily want me to go there because it was far away. Yeah, there's just things, a lot of fighting for myself because of feeling as if others don't trust me if I make a risky decision. My husband not wanting me to do a yoga teacher training because it cost too much money. I did it anyway. And I'm so incredibly grateful because really the main relationship that you have is you. The most important relationship that you have is you. And that's not arrogant. That's not selfish. That's not self-involved. That connects you to how you serve. And how you serve in an authentic, genuine way is, again, another huge protective factor from depression and suicide. Because service to me comes from something greater than me. And so when I get messages like that, it's about that connection. I connected with someone that I might never talk to again, and that's worth it. So take that in. And that connection reminds me that I'm not alone. You're not alone. I make mistakes. I get scared. I get stressed out. I've felt alone in my family. I've at times questioned, am I good enough parent? When I share these things, I think it breaks down an even greater wall that some clients have or people have. And when others share it with me, I'm honored to be a safe presence for them. So I want to share with you a post that I did on Threads. So what are my confessions? What are my confessions? You'll have to follow the ethics to a T. Do I let my clients follow me on social media? Yeah. Have we had potlucks together as a part of the Alchemize group? Yes. Am I even scared right now saying this? Yes. Do I want to let my clients know the music that I like? Yeah. Do they know that I love nature? Do they know that I had a panic episode after an argument? You know, when my car broke down, got a flat tire, client helped me move into my new office, come to my yoga classes, they buy my t-shirts. I don't think I coerce or force them. The confessions is that I'm being myself and I'm being authentic. The confessions are that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of being a therapist and not every client knows. That there's requirements on what gets approved by insurance or what is deemed as medically necessity for the service. And so there's someone in one of the groups that I'm in that's related to therapists around the world, I think, and they have started to not practice in the form of therapy and instead just call them like helping conversations. Because I think more and more people are realizing this. There are some people that are going to stay in the profession and the way that it is. And there's people that are going to listen to themselves more and notice the change. Notice the shift. Why do we judge coaches? Why do we judge healers? Are they not professionals because there's not specific regulations? Yeah, there are some people that need the regulations per se. There are some harm that's done. Same as therapists. It exists everywhere. There's doctors that have been fraudulent, violated things. It exists everywhere. These are conversations to spark critical thinking, to spark an openness. I do not know so much. People prove me wrong all the time. And I am okay now and that's huge. I am okay if I'm wrong. Show me. Help me understand your perspective. I don't know a lot. My way is not the right way. Doesn't mean that my story and my words aren't worth existing. So I did this post. I got a lot of responses. Curious. Who are my therapists here who are offering the most real, raw support, humanness, mentoring, coaching, healing, whatever you want to call it, that's not technically licensed or regulated. So are you a therapist? If you don't have a license, I have a whole podcast episode about that with Alex Sharp, your feral therapist. That's her social media name. Please go check that out. It was such an amazing conversation. One of the top ones. Please listen. So some of the comments here, I said I technically have my license while I have a whole view and I want to know other people's thoughts. And here's what I've heard from people. Oh, I didn't respond to this person. I'm just seeing their message. So it says, we have to have a chat. I will help us focus you getting through the daily struggles of life in a holistic way, starting with mind, body, and soul connections. Let me know what your goals are so we can start making things happen one day at a time. That's coach. Again, trust your intuition. Trust who you want to work with. Check out different people. You listen to what resonates. Or are you going in with, they need to have these credentials, they need to have these reviews, right? We tend to look at, reviews. But how does things show up in a very synchronistic way of, I want to work with her or I want to work with him, regardless of their credentials. Present in the moment, listening to yourself. And maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe you go months into it. It doesn't mean it was a waste of time. So this person studied hypnotherapy, yoga, meditation. Honestly, what I do in session cannot be taught. I agree. There's so many things. There's so many gifts and talents and abilities that people have that just cannot be taught. It's you. You are the skill. You are something worth offering. You have something in you that's worth offering. And maybe you do need to go to school. Maybe you do need to get a degree. Maybe you do need to get a license. I benefited from all of that. I don't regret any of it. It got me here. And it's both. It's like, thank you, school and license. You're taking a ton of money from me now. and I appreciate the me that gets to be put into it. So this person said they're curious about the process in the US, but in the UK, you need a L45 counseling certificate to practice as a counselor and need to be registered with a specific organization, or you are not recognized as a professional body. It ensures people are appropriately trained and insured. Psychologists also need to be trained at an appropriate level. Think mental health nurses can provide some services and even cognitive behavioral therapy after a one-day course, but they have a lot of other expertise. True. Yes. And I'm not saying that we don't need those regulations or certifications. I'm pushing the conversation because are there people that get that training that still suck? And are there people who don't get that years and years and years of being registered with an organization just to be considered professional? They get to make more money, but you also put in a ton of money into it. So it's all things to consider. All of it is important to consider. Okay, what else? This person said yes and no. I do have qualifications, but work mostly as an unregistered health worker, and then the title is legit. We still have to abide by the health codes. So that's interesting. They're an unregistered health worker, but still have to abide by the health codes. This person accredited in all three: Reiki, herbalism, and neuropathy. I'm in college working towards my doctorate degree to become a neuropathic doctor. From clients to patients is my goals, missions. I don't fit the typical modern day narrative. I honor the mind, body, and spirit, health and wellness as a whole. I dive into the roots of our alignment. I live to change American healthcare, quite literally. And this is what I'm passionate about too. That I think this is going to shift the systems, hopefully. If not, I can do it one connection, one human at a time. Because even as being licensed for myself, I I have practices that are not accredited or that would fit under what could be considered continuing education credits. And I need 40 of them every 2 years, and they all cost money. But the holistic practices, the yoga practices, are not considered evidence based, even though there is research for the benefits of those practices. And there's someone in here, and I had a good discussion with this person, and I get their view, and their view is valid and matters as well. That those offerings don't necessarily need to be under a therapy lens. Those offerings like yoga or the oracle cards or even certain spiritual Reiki, right? Like my energy psychology stuff, tapping, might not be clinically indicated for someone more severe. And I don't work with the more severe population. I don't work with schizophrenics. I don't work with delusions and hallucinations or severe bipolar. That's not my specialty. And I refer to people who do that. And so again, I think it's all individualistic. If I have a population that I have more of a niche for, and that's who I serve. And there's room for all of us. Okay, so this person certified in a couple of trauma therapy modalities. I guide clients through healing trauma limiting beliefs. They don't say if they're licensed or not. This person says, I'm a therapist, well-earned certification. I'm a psychotherapist and solution-focused hypnotherapist. Many clients I have had tried counseling and other talking therapies and not have had success, but they've walked away from me feeling renewed. I don't need the letters after my name, but in order to help people. I've got my piece of paper that states I've done my training and I can do the job. So that's interesting. Yeah. Because I think they're saying they don't have the license, but they have a certification, maybe. But again, it helps from their perspective. I come from low income, adverse childhood experience, a lot of self-built success and survival mode. I've grown into someone I love who's creative, courageous, and makes money alongside my complete autonomy. And that's what qualifies me. That's what makes me qualified. They said they're an accredited EFT practitioner. I use it as a tool alongside talking, intuitive guidance, and coaching. This person got their bachelor's of arts in psych and was once a crisis care and addiction treatments counselor. I never pursued the extra letters. That's what I know too about a lot of addictions counselors. They're counselors and they don't have certain credentials. At time, I thought I couldn't handle being the keeper of so much pain. Fast forward, now I get to help people put pain in the rearview mirror by combining energy work and support and practical lifestyle changes. I get to be creative with my approach to each client and I offer holistic solutions. I love it. See, that's what I want that passion from people. I want people to love what they do and know that you can and that it's possible and it's out there. This person's an inner child healer. I help women take agency over their lives and stop the emotional labor. I do not believe in certificates or license. My life experience is my credential. A license doesn't necessarily mean anything if you cannot do what you promise. It's just a tool of capitalism. Again, one view. It's one view. This person, I have a bunch of letters after my name, but not licensed as a therapist. I work with women who are recovering from trauma, specializing in domestic violence, because that was me 20 years ago. So, right, sometimes your lived experience is your most therapeutic tool or your most purposeful tool. This person teaches from compassion, empathy, and experience. Some people with a license can't even say that. Okay, next. I almost did my master's in social work to be a therapist, but after I completed my 450 hours in the field to get it, they changed it to 2,000 hours. I went a less traditional route, learning facilitation and coaching, belief repatterning, becoming a priestess, and developing my own transformational modality, which is just like multidimensional parts work. All right, this person, I am licensed and accredited, but came from other disciplines, embodiment teacher, yoga teacher, Reiki. My work is holistic in nature. I don't fit the typical therapist mode. I'm critical at times of the therapy field. To me, it seems like a multi-level marketing. There's a lot of change needed, and I think it's better than false prophets and self-proclaimed gurus selling snake oil and exploiting people. Again, right? Both sides. And they can kind of be both sides of the same coin, right? We need to judge the spiritual like gurus versus the overly credentialed, licensed, top seasoned therapist or medical professional, hold the space for all of it. You find where you land. I'm a biodynamic craniosacral therapist and energy healer devoted to helping people transform their lives by reconnecting with the innate wisdom of their mind, body, and soul. The body holds deep intelligence and a natural capacity to heal through a gentle, non-invasive touch. This supports the nervous system regulation, the biodynamic cranial work. That's so cool. That's really cool. See, all of these options, there's so much out there. We can feel oversaturated by it for sure. So it's again like taking the time to see what you are what your impulses take you to. I'm an intuitive guide and reader who helps people heal, reconnect with themselves, and find their own power. Not a therapist, but deeply passionate about emotional healing and transformation. I'm not qualified in therapy yet, and I would never call myself a therapist, but I teach singing and now what I call voice stagecraft for well-being. Both of those things definitely have therapy elements. That's really cool. Let's see. I'm an energy healer. I help women return to their true selves, love themselves unconditionally. My work isn't therapy, but it's deeply intuitive blend of energy healing, somatic practices, aromatherapy, and personal readings based on birth chart. And that's it, right? You can have like a therapist doing the more clinical work, and then you can also have or attend to see, meet, work with these modalities as well. I'm not saying get rid of therapy. I wonder if I can exist as both. And can they still be under the same umbrella? Because what I'm being told is a lot of it needs to be separate. And I want to try to integrate them together. I'm a social worker who got dragged into private practice. I say that because I went to grad school to be a social worker, not a therapist. And now I'm here supporting patients and families using the skills as I did as a hospice care worker, just from the comfort of my home on a headset. I think I'd argue I'm more effective now because I get more time in a therapeutic space than I did as a social worker. I still don't like calling myself a therapist. Interesting. Because the picture that I have of that person is saying, tell them how that makes them feel. And I say everything but that. Interesting. Yeah. Master's of social work, on my way to being a licensed clinical social worker, but I'm anything but your typical therapist. So nuanced. I almost went back for a master's to work as a therapist, but realized they barely spent any time on ADHD. My late diagnosis gave me such a different vision of myself, so I became a certified ADHD and family coach. The certification and ethics are important because there's so much snake oil that wastes time or does harm. Sure. Yes. And that's exactly why I still got trained in my yoga teacher training. And we still, I think, need that support and something that helps you feel, whether it's confident in yourself or that you're following rules, regulations, policies, ethics. I've honestly had better results working with coaches who aren't licensed than I ever did with therapists who have a degree or diploma. That's just been my personal experience. I'm a life coach with no letters, just real, raw life experience. I do have a master's degree in health psychology, but went an alternative route to helping people. I'm a nutritionist, trainer, and life coach. I work closely with VIP clients on everything in their lives that is keeping them small. We work on identity shifts and habits that lead to new ways of thinking. I'll never refer to myself as a therapist because I'm not licensed and it's such a controversial subject. But I will say all but maybe 2 of my clients have come to me after trying therapy and said they struggled to connect with their therapist, and that what I offer is much more organic and effective. I know that's not the case with all licensed therapists, but a lot of them are out of touch and treat their clients like a textbook case study. Yeah. And maybe that's what I'm noticing more and more is the schooling and the training felt very robotic and inviting in your authenticity and your intuition. I'm a life coach and mental health advocate with a master's in human services, working on my doctorate. Healing doesn't always happen inside the system. Some of us do the work without the letters through heart, presence, and truth. I'm licensed, but I ensure that I'm authentic first. I keep it professional and real. This is who I am, raw, funny, outspoken, loving. And I love that. Like I know some therapists who utilize a lot of humor, and that's them. And they have their own style. And I love that. I love that. I think supporting one another as a human isn't limited by license. Personally, I do what I do to support people that come to me for advice using whatever ethical means I have at my disposal. At the moment, I dig calling myself a guide more than anything, guiding you to your most authentic essence and power. And that's what I found, again, with this changing of the system, is that the mental health system focuses so much on the symptoms and the disorder and less of bringing people to their humanness and identifying the core root issues. Like if I don't dig into the core of my need for external validation or connection, forcing connection versus authentic connection. And my therapist needs to catch that and see that and work with me through that. That doesn't mean they need to go out of their boundaries or be vulnerable and self disclose or violate anything with me. But the mental health field as a whole has really, from my experience, 10 plus years being a therapist, going through the whole process, is here are the symptoms, relieve them. Here, take these coping strategies versus actually getting at the root. And I think we're evolving and we're coming into that. And that's why there's more coaches and healers and this type of holistic, somatic based work, getting through the limiting beliefs so that live in your body. That's beyond, for me, to me, that's beyond just CBT. That's beyond just talk and psychoanalysis. And there's some people that want just the Band-Aids. Okay, if you can live through life like that, beautiful. But many have been in therapy for years and still feel lost or hopeless or stuck. And we're in a time now more than ever in immense stress, in survival mode of the state of the world, and especially in the United States of our country. And being with yourself, liking yourself, understanding yourself, feeling your emotions and feeling them safely, and taking the risks authentically comes through a process, maybe with another guiding you there, supporting you there, with a group. I think the power of group dynamic and community and connection in a group setting has been more transformative than the individual work, bringing that together. That's what my group Alchemize is. That's what my next cohort is on, the light cohort, limitless inspired therapeutic experience on awakening your authentic power, the use of authenticity as an intervention, and all because I listened to these impulses and feel that there's value in sharing this now, and that this me is the intervention. So there's a lot more on here. But feel free to follow me on Threads because I could be here for another hour reading these. This person says, I helped a lot. I've been helped a lot by licensed social workers, but I know someone seriously harmed by an unlicensed therapist. So again, I think it goes both ways because there are people who, yes, have been harmed by those who are not licensed and those who have been harmed by those who are licensed. It goes both ways. So follow me on Threads, Amanda on the Flip. That's my Instagram name as well. You can go back and read those. Thank you so much for being here. Let me pull a card. You can check out the tapping videos. I'm not going to do a tapping practice today, but you can. I shuffled. This one fell. The spider and the passion flower. Creative. The spider. Let's read it. It's getting dark. The sun's going down. It's number 2. Spiders represents a balance of the light and the dark. Cunning yet patient, they spin intricate webs that are both beautiful and deadly. The passion flower is a flower that has come to symbolize faith. It was named in the 16th century missionaries who associated the plant with the passion of Christ. It represents the crown of thorns, its 10 petals, and 10 faithful apostles. You can solve your problems unconventionally and with cleverness. You need to only exercise patience in order to fully appreciate the results of your labor. To overcome a creative block, try to be like a spider. Have faith that your quiet efforts will pay off. How may I overcome an obstacle using my talents? Right there. Right there. You can solve your problems unconventionally. That's what this is. It doesn't mean that I'm better or that this is the right way. It's just one way. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself and being here with me. You amaze me. I love you. Comment, subscribe, like, share. Check out the links. Be a part of this community if this resonates with you. You amaze me. I love you.